How important is your family to you? Some of us are very close to our family members, while some of us might have a fraught relationship with our families. In any case, kinship is a central feature of culture, and all cultures have a set of rules for making sense of relationships between individuals, grouping some people together as close relatives and excluding others as more distant. Kinship overlaps with any number of social institutions. For example, you might be expected to marry outside of your kin group, a practice known as exogamy. You might inherit social status or property based on your position within a kinship framework, so there are also socioeconomic and political correlations to kinship. Furthermore, certain kin groups may have particular ceremonial or ritual responsibilities within a community, and the language we use to greet or refer to one another in our everyday lives is charged with the symbolism of kinship. People we are not related to are, in certain circumstances, referred to as sisters, brothers, mamas, sons. No wonder kinship is so interesting and important to anthropologists and other social scientists. Kinship has been a focus of anthropological inquiry practically from the discipline's inception. Lewis Henry Morgan was an American lawyer turned anthropologist who was very famous for his mid 1800s study of the Iroquois, a group of tribes indigenous to the Northeast United States. In 1871, he published the foundational book in anthropological analysis of kinship called Systems of Consanguinity and Affinity of the Human Family. Anthropologists sometimes use the term consanguinity to refer to relatedness by descent, while the term affinity is used to refer to relatedness by marriage. He was highly influential on Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, two prominent 19th century sociopolitical theorists who were themselves concerned with the historical progression from kin based societies to class based societies. In a more recent example, American anthropologist David Schneider revived modern interest in kinship studies with his 1968 book American Kinship, A Cultural Account, in which he challenged anthropologists to consider kinship as more than just a network of relatedness, but as a system of symbols and meanings that people use to make sense of the world and their place within it. One way to look at kinship is in terms of descent. Descent refers to who you are considered to be a descendant, or who you are considered closely related to. Some cultures have a unilineal descent system, in which kinship is primarily traced through one parent. Societies that trace their descendant through the mother's lineage are referred to as matrilineal, while those tracing descent through their father's lineage are referred to as patrilineal. These societies obviously recognize the biology of human reproduction, but membership in the matrilineal or patrilineal kin group has important cultural implications. An example of a society that traditionally practiced matrilineal descent is the Apache of the North American Southwest. Children of both sexes are considered to be part of their mother's lineage. In fact, in the Apache language, the word for mother is used not only for one's biological mother, but for her sisters as well. All women of the same family, of the same generation, get the same title. Furthermore, although fathers obviously play important roles in one's life, the responsibility of masculine support and guidance falls not to the father, but instead to the mother's brother, as he is in a cultural sense the closest matrilineal male relative. One's father would play that role to his sister's children. Make sense? It can be confusing but fascinating to explore kinship systems that are different from our own. In such unilineal kinship systems, important distinctions are also usually made regarding cousins. Let's use matrilineality as an example again. This example also assumes exogamy. One is expected to marry someone outside of one's own kin group. In a matrilineal system, your mother's sister's children would be matrilineally related to you. They are what we also call your parallel cousins. Parallel cousins are not suitable marriage partners because they are too closely related to you. However, your mother's brother's children are not matrilineally related to you, they are members of their own mother's kin group. We call them your cross cousins, and they would be acceptable marriage partners in many societies. Besides unilineal kinship systems, there are also what are called cognatic systems. These are systems in which kinship is traced through some combination of both male and female links. In bilateral systems, you are considered to be equally closely related to both your mother's and your father's side of the family. In other cognatic systems, kinship is traced through male and female links to some revered ancestor. These can be very complex systems to analyze. I would also like to mention what some anthropologists call fictive kin. These are people who were adopted or otherwise incorporated into a kinship system they were not born into, which is a pretty common way to form relationships. Just think about how often we use kinship terms, brother and sister especially come to mind, to refer to people that we feel especially close to, even when they are not actually our brothers or sisters. In fact, in many cases, the strong bonds between non relatives are stronger than those between relatives. In that sense, I'm actually a little uncomfortable with the term fictive kin. I realize the need to name the process, but these are definitely non fictitious bonds. They are very real and very meaningful. In another Apache example, there is a really great ethnography called Thunder Rides a Black Horse, written by anthropologist Claire Ferrer. Ferrer is a woman of Euro-American descent who spent decades living among the Mescalero Apache in New Mexico. She became so close to the people she was studying that she was actually incorporated into the family that she worked most closely with. The children of that family called her the Apache word for mother/aunt, and she calls them the Apache word for daughter/niece or son/nephew. For this week's forum post, I would like you to consider kinship from a temporal perspective. In your view, how have ideas about kinship or the practice of kinship related interactions in your own culture changed over time? You can consider this from a personal perspective with reference to your own family, or a more generalized perspective with reference to broader social ideas, or both. In any case, you may also choose to comment on what you see as any normative ideals about what families should look like and whether those ideals are actually attained in real life. Whenever possible, use the terms and concepts covered in this chapter. For this week's film, I'd like to mention that I usually try to choose videos less than 30 minutes for the class, but I couldn't help but choose this longer film because it's so fascinating. I think it is a great illustration of how kinship overlaps in meaningful and impactful ways with other social institutions in a society. So please keep that in mind as you watch. That's all I'd like to cover for this week's chapter. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me.